Hey everyone, welcome to the sermon study for the week of March 26th, 2017. We are in week 3 of our Called Out series, and this week Phil Tagg preached a message called Called Out of Complacency. Now, this was a challenging sermon. Phil preached from the parable of the 3 servants in Matthew chapter 25, where we read about a master who entrusts his wealth to 3 servants as he goes away. The servant who received 5 bags of silver invested it and earned 5 more bags of silver. The servant who received 2 bags of silver invested it and earned 2 more bags of silver. But the servant who received 1 bag of silver buried it in the ground because he was afraid to take a risk. As a result, the master rewarded the faithful servants, but punished the servant who didn't seek to do anything with what he was given. Now, Phil said that based on this parable, we can see that God has entrusted us with something. And if God has entrusted us, then that means that God has expectations as well. Now, Phil said that this story teaches us about stewardship and how there is no room to be complacent with what God has given us. And so from this, Phil drew 3 main points. Number 1, we'll learn that what you have is not yours. Your talents, your abilities, your skills, all these things really aren't yours. They were given to you by God to be used for His purposes. That's what a manager does. They manage the resources that they have been given for the sake of the master. And number 2, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. What this means is that God gave you enough to do what He wants you to do. See, we often spend a lot of time wishing that we had the abilities of the next person, and then we fail to understand that we have been equipped for a mission of our own. Our job is to be faithful with what we've been given. Our responsibility is tied to our ability, as Phil said, which means that God expects from you something in accordance with what He's given to you. He asks that we use what we have been given. And the third point was, do what you can with what you've got. You see, we often do anything we can to minimize risk. But this parable seems to say that when it comes to investing in the kingdom, God honors risk-taking. The servant with 5 bags of silver invested it all, and so did the servant with only 2 bags. And the fact that the servant with 2 bags didn't earn as much as the servant with 5 bags didn't really matter. You see, the master commended them both because they were faithful with what they had. The servant with only 1 bag, however, didn't risk anything, and he ended up losing his job. Now finally, Pastor Phil connected this message to our Called Out Generosity initiative. As you might know, our goal as a church is to reach hundreds more people for Christ, but we can't do that without each other. That's why we're looking for 100% participation in this initiative. Now, clearly, we're not all able to give the same amount towards this, but we are all able to make a sacrifice. So Phil asked all of us to pray about what that might look like for us. So remember, we've all been given something that we can use for the kingdom. The question is, will we? Now have a great discussion with your groups. Parables like this one can be puzzling sometimes, especially because they often tend to use rather harsh language. However, it's important to know that they are supposed to convey principles, not literal correlations between the parable and real life. So, what other principles can we take away from our parable today? One thing to note is that when the master leaves his servants with his money, he doesn't actually give his servants any instructions. He doesn't say, "Okay, here's the money, now go out and make wise investments with my money." He just hands it to them and leaves. That leaves things pretty open-ended. You see, it's in our nature to want rules to follow. We just want to be told exactly what we should do or how much we should give. This is why so many Christians tend to turn a relationship with Jesus into legalistic rule following instead of a relationship. So if the master in the parable had simply said, "Please invest this percentage of my money before I get back," that would have been easy. But he didn't do that. He expected his servants to act according to their knowledge of who he was. Now that might be where you're at today. When it comes to what we're supposed to do or what we're supposed to give, sometimes we just wish someone would just lay it all out there for us, tell us exactly what we're supposed to do. Instead, we have to pray, we have to discern, and sense what it is that God would have us do based on who God is. Sometimes this is the frustrating part of the Christian life, but more often it's actually the fun part, because it draws us into a deeper relationship with God. Now go ahead and have a great time discussing these principles further.